My name is Lydia Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how my family tried to erase me. It's also the story of how I took back my life, my name, and every last dollar they ever thought was theirs. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. It was my 29th birthday, a gray Tuesday in October, and it was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, my parents stood in the doorway of my childhood home, a place that had felt less like a home and more like a hotel I was barely tolerated in. Their faces were cold, smug, and utterly devoid of the love you expect to see from the people who brought you into the world. My father, Richard, a man whose pride was as inflated as his credit card debt, pointed a thumb over his shoulder toward the driveway. His expression was one of bored finality. "You're old enough to handle yourself," he said, his voice flat, as if he were canceling a magazine subscription. "Pack your things. We're done." My mother, Diane, stood beside him, a statue of disapproval. Her arms were crossed so tightly against her chest I thought she might snap a rib. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on a spot on the wall just past my ear, a technique she had perfected over years of practice. It was her way of making me disappear, even when I was standing right in front of her. They tossed me onto the street like I was garbage. That's not a metaphor, it's the literal truth. One moment, I was holding a sad, single-serving cupcake I'd bought for myself, hoping for at least a forced chorus of happy birthday. The next, I was standing on the cold concrete of the driveway, the cupcake crushed on the ground, staring at two black trash bags that contained the shredded remains of my life. Growing up in that house was a masterclass in emotional invisibility. My existence was conditional, my worth measured against the blinding light of my younger sister, Kelsey. For her, the sun was always shining, the bank accounts were always open, and love was an endless resource. She was the golden child, the family's show pony, the living proof of their supposed success as parents. I remember my 10th birthday. I had asked for a new bike, a simple 10-speed from the local department store. I dreamed of riding it to the library, of feeling the wind in my hair, a small taste of freedom. I unwrapped my one gift to find a set of encyclopedias. "For your education, Lydia," my father had said sternly. "It's important to be practical." I spent the rest of the day in my room, reading about ancient Rome. While outside, I could hear Kelsey laughing as she rode the beautiful chestnut pony they had bought her for her 10th birthday a year earlier. The car was another milestone of difference. When I turned 16, I was working 15 hours a week at a grocery store. I saved up for months to buy a bus pass. On cold winter nights, I would stand at the bus stop, my feet numb, and watch other kids drive by in their parents' cars. I asked my father once, just once, if he could help me get a cheap, used car. He gave me a lecture that lasted an hour about the value of hard work and the entitlement of my generation. I never asked again. 2 years later, on Kelsey's 16th birthday, a brand new cherry red convertible was parked in the driveway with a giant bow on it. When she inevitably scraped the side of it against a pole in the mall parking lot a week later, my parents hugged her while she cried. "It's just metal, sweetie," my mother cooed. "We can fix metal." They couldn't fix me because in their eyes I was already broken. My struggles were character flaws, Kelsey's were charming quirks. When I worked 2 jobs to get through community college, they told their friends I was finding my way. When they were paying Kelsey's full tuition and sorority dues at a private, out-of-state university, they bragged that she was investing in her future. I remember calling home one night, my voice shaking because I was $50 short on rent. My mother sighed dramatically into the phone. "Lydia, you have to learn to budget. Your father and I can't always be your safety net." The next day, Kelsey posted a photo on Instagram of a new designer handbag, captioned, "Retail Therapy Day. Thanks for spoiling me, Mom and Dad. Hatch, best parents ever." Their cruelty became a kind of sport. They would forget I was coming for dinner, leaving me to make a sandwich while they ate steak. They would praise Kelsey's latest social media post in front of me, knowing full well I had just published an article in the local paper. It was a slow, methodical campaign to dismantle my self-worth, and I, desperate for their approval, kept coming back for more, thinking that if I just tried a little harder, if I was just a little more successful, a little quieter, a little less me, They would finally love me. On my 29th birthday, I finally understood they never would. I had driven over to the house with that stupid cupcake on the passenger seat, a pathetic symbol of my own stubborn hope. The house was unnervingly quiet when I let myself in. The air was sterile, smelling of bleach and finality. They were waiting for me in the living room, Richard, Diane, and Kelsey, a tribunal. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice small. The cupcake felt heavy in my hand. My father's lips curled into a smirk. "A life lesson, Lydia. It's our birthday gift to you. We're teaching you to stand on your own 2 feet." That's when I saw them. 2 heavy-duty trash bags slumped by the door, leaking the story of my eviction. My worn-out sweaters, my favorite books with the cracked spines, my laptop with the half-finished novel I was writing. My whole life, condensed into 60 gallons of black plastic. My mother, in a gesture of pure theatrical cruelty, walked to the mantelpiece. She picked up the only photo of me she'd allowed to be displayed, a picture from my community college graduation. I was smiling, genuinely happy for once. She looked at the photo, then at me, her expression unreadable. Then she dropped it into the open maw of the trash bag. The sound of the glass shattering was like a gunshot in the silent room. "This will be the best lesson for you," she muttered, a chilling satisfaction in her voice. "You've been a burden long enough." My father, as if on cue, grabbed the bags and began dragging them across the hardwood floor, the plastic screeching in protest. "Come on," he grunted, shoving them out the front door. "Time to grow up." I stood frozen, my mind a blank screen of white noise. I couldn't process it. This wasn't real. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not on a quiet suburban street in Denver. Then, through the fog, I saw Kelsey. She was leaning against the far wall, her phone held up, the little red recording light glowing like a malevolent eye. She was filming my destruction. A small, cruel smile played on her lips as she zoomed in on my face. "Try to look a little more pathetic, Lydia," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "This is going to get so many views." That broke the spell. The sheer, unadulterated malice in her voice cut through my shock. I stumbled forward. "Why?" The word was a dry, ragged whisper. "What did I ever do to you?" My father laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the suddenly cavernous room. He shoved the last of my things into the driveway and turned to face me. "You were born, Lydia. That was your first mistake." He slammed the door in my face. The deadbolt clicked into place, a sound of absolute finality. I tried the handle, locked. I banged my fist on the solid wood, screaming their names. I could see their shadows through the frosted glass, watching me, unmoving. Then one by one, they turned and walked away. I was left alone on the sidewalk, the evening air growing cold. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, lonely shadows that seemed to mock me. Humiliation washed over me in a scalding wave. My neighbor's curtains twitched. Someone across the street was walking their dog and stared, then hurried away. I was a spectacle, a charity case, a problem someone else had discarded. I slept in my car that night. I drove aimlessly for an hour before ending up in the far corner of a Walmart parking lot, the only place I could think of where no one would bother me. I pulled a thin sweater from one of the trash bags and curled up in the driver's seat, the fabric smelling of the home that was no longer mine. The tears came then, hot and furious. They were not the quiet, sad tears of my childhood. They were tears of rage, of grief, of a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical wound. I cried until my body ached and my throat was raw, until there was nothing left inside me but a cold, hard, echoing emptiness. And in that emptiness, a forgotten memory sparked to life. It was my grandfather, Arthur Morgan. My grandfather was a quiet, shrewd man who had built a small hardware store into a multi-million-dollar real estate empire. He saw things other people missed. He saw the rot in his own son, the weakness in his daughter-in-law, and the casual cruelty they directed at me. He was the only person who had ever truly seen me. He'd praised my drawings, read my stories, and told me I had a mind like a steel trap. Years ago, just after I turned 18 and just before cancer took him, he had sat me down in his dusty, book-lined study. He smelled of old paper and peppermint. He took my hand, his skin as thin as parchment, and his eyes, though faded, were sharp and clear. "Lydia," he'd said, his voice a low rumble, People aren't always what they seem, not even family. Your father is a peacock, all feathers and no sense. Your mother enables him. They are careless people, and I will not let them destroy what I have built or what you might become. He had explained it to me then, in simple terms I barely understood. He had established something called the Morgan Family Trust. Everything, the house they lived in, the vast investment portfolio, the commercial properties, the lines of credit they used like an open bar, was an asset of the trust. He had made my parents the primary beneficiaries, allowing them to live off the profits. But he had not given them control. He had given that to me. In the fine print of a document thick enough to stop a door, he had named me, his quiet, overlooked granddaughter, as the sole, legally appointed trustee. "You have the power, my girl," he had whispered, a sad, knowing smile on his face. "The power to protect the assets. They will never see it coming. They think you're weak. Let them." He had given me a key to a safe deposit box and the name of his old, trusted lawyer. "Don't use it unless you have to," he'd warned. "But if they ever push you out, you push back harder." Lying in the cramped, cold silence of my car, his words came back to me, not as a faint memory, but as a blueprint, a declaration of war. My parents thought they had cut me off. They had no idea they had just handed me the scissors. The next few weeks were a blur of survival. I secured a job as a night waitress at a gritty 24-hour diner on the edge of town. I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., serving lukewarm coffee to truckers and insomniacs, my feet throbbing and my body humming with exhaustion. I showered at a cheap 24-hour gym and lived on instant noodles and stolen glances at my reflection in darkened shop windows, barely recognizing the tired, haunted woman staring back at me. I was a ghost, living in the margins of a world that had thrown me away. But during the day, I wasn't a ghost. I was a general, planning a campaign. I found the safe deposit box. Inside was a pristine copy of the trust documents and a letter from my grandfather. "They will underestimate you," he wrote. "That will be their undoing." I took those documents to a young, hungry lawyer whose office was in a strip mall. He was skeptical at first, looking at my worn-out clothes and the exhaustion etched onto my face. Then he started reading the trust. His eyes widened. A slow grin spread across his face. "Ms. Morgan," he said, his voice filled with a newfound respect. "You're not just the trustee. Your grandfather structured this like an ironclad fortress. You have the authority to suspend all beneficiary access for gross mismanagement or behavior detrimental to the trust's integrity. Kicking the legal trustee onto the street seems pretty detrimental to me." We spent the next 3 months building the case. My lawyer, whose name was Ben, was meticulous. We documented everything. He helped me get a new bank account, a post office box, and a burner phone. While I was refilling ketchup bottles and wiping down sticky tables at night, my mind was on legal clauses and asset management strategies. I lived a double life. By night, I was the invisible waitress. By day, I was the silent architect of my family's downfall. There were moments of doubt. I'd see a family laughing in a booth at the diner and feel a pang of grief so sharp it stole my breath. Was this really who I wanted to be? Vengeful? Cold? But then I would check Kelsey's Instagram and see her posing in my old bedroom, which had been redecorated in pink and white, with a caption, "Finally got rid of all the old gloomy energy in my new glam room." I would see my parents' smiling faces in photos from a luxury vacation in Hawaii, tagged #living our best life. They weren't just living without me, they were celebrating my absence, and my resolve would harden like steel. The day came on a crisp Monday morning, exactly 3 months after they had thrown me out. I sat in Ben's office, the legal documents spread out before me like a death sentence. My hand was steady as I picked up the pen. I signed my name, Lydia Morgan, on each page. The strokes were clean and decisive. There was no theatrical flourish, no moment of vengeful glee. It was a quiet, solemn act of justice, of survival. "It's done," Ben said, gathering the papers. "The notifications are being sent electronically to all financial institutions. I'd say their world starts ending in about 1 hour." I walked out of his office into the bright morning sun and breathed in the cool, clean air. For the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free. The chaos began, as I later learned from a sympathetic old neighbor, at a Whole Foods. My mother, a woman who considered grocery shopping a competitive sport, had loaded her cart with $700 worth of organic kale, imported cheese, and artisanal bread. She presented her Platinum American Express with a flourish. It was declined. Confused, she tried her debit card. Declined. Her Visa. Declined. The cashier, a pimply teenager, looked at her with a mixture of pity and terror. My mother, a woman whose entire identity was built on a foundation of effortless wealth and public grace, began to unravel. She screamed. She accused the cashier of incompetence. She demanded to speak to a manager. In the end, she was forced to abandon her overflowing cart and flee the store, her face burning with a humiliation so absolute it was legendary in the neighborhood by nightfall. My father's reckoning came in a far more corporate setting. He received an automated alert that the six-figure mortgage payment on the house had bounced. This was followed by an urgent summons to his bank for a fraud inquiry. He stormed into the bank's marble lobby, all bluster and indignation, demanding to see the bank manager, a man he played golf with. The manager, a cool and collected woman named Mrs. Gable, met him in her glass-walled office. She looked at her computer screen and said, her voice devoid of emotion, "Richard, all assets of the Morgan Family Trust have been placed on a protective freeze by the trustee. All lines of credit, all accounts, everything has been suspended." "That's impossible! I am the beneficiary!" my father roared, his voice echoing through the quiet bank. "Yes," Mrs. Gable said, her gaze unwavering. "But you are not the trustee. For any further information, you'll have to speak with your daughter, Lydia Morgan." The story, as the neighbor told me, was that my father turned a shocking shade of purple, sputtered for a moment like a dying engine, and had to be escorted from the building by security. Kelsey's world imploded digitally. Her tuition payment for her private university was frozen, resulting in an immediate suspension from classes. Her car, a leased Mercedes, was repossessed from the sorority house parking lot. Her credit cards were declined when she tried to buy a matcha latte. Her carefully curated online life of effortless luxury dissolved in a series of tearful, incoherent social media posts that were mercilessly mocked before she finally deleted her accounts altogether. The calls started that evening. The first was my father, his voice a furious, sputtering roar of threats and curses. I listened silently, holding the phone away from my ear, letting his impotent rage wash over me. I didn't say a word. I just let him burn himself out, and then I hung up. An hour later, my mother called, sobbing hysterically. It was a calculated performance of victimhood. "Lydia, how could you do this to us? After everything we've given you, we're your family." "No," I said, my voice calm and even. "You are the people who threw me away on my birthday. That's all you are now." I hung up. They waited a few days. They must have thought I would cave. When I didn't, they called together on speakerphone. Their voices were different now. The anger was gone. The manipulative tears were gone. All that was left was a raw, pathetic desperation. They were broken. "Lydia, please," my mother began, her voice a thin whisper. "We're sorry. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Please, just turn it back on. We'll do anything." "We'll let you come home," my father added, his voice strained, as if the words physically pained him. He was offering me scraps from the table he had already overturned. I stood in the middle of my small, clean, one-bedroom apartment, an apartment I was paying for myself, with a job I had found myself. I looked around at the second-hand furniture I had bought, at the books I had stacked against the wall, at the single painting I had hung. It wasn't much, but it was mine, all of it. I took a deep breath. The storm inside me was finally over. The anger that had been my fuel for so long had burned out, leaving behind a profound and unshakable calm. I wasn't their victim. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't even their problem anymore. "I didn't freeze your lives," I said softly, the words coming out clear and true without a tremor of doubt. "You did that when you threw me into the street on my birthday." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then I pressed the red button on my screen, severing the connection. I blocked their numbers. I blocked them from my life. I never spoke to them again. I learned to live with the quiet. In fact, I learned to love it. It was the sound of peace. It was the sound of strength. It was the sound of a life that was finally, completely my own. That was the last time I let them control me. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most, you know that the best revenge isn't loud and angry. It's quiet strength. It's silence. It's building a life they can't touch. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more.